Hello, everyone, and welcome to another GamePad online industry interview. My name is Nigel. I'm the co-founder of mayamada and organizer of the GamePad events. Hopefully by this time, you know, as part of GamePad, we talk to industry professionals, and specific for this event, this autumn GamePad online, I'm speaking to people who have just broken into the games industry to find out basically how they did it and any tips for people who would like to do the same. So yeah, as usual, I'm going to speak into industry professionals, but with a special view on those who've just started their journey in the video games industry. So my first interview for the day, I'm going to be talking with Emily Cullen, game system engineer at Jagex. Emily, welcome to the first interview. How's it going?
Good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool, thanks for joining me. And yeah, like I said, it will be interesting to find out a bit about your journey, your first steps in the industry, and some of the other stuff you do as well. We're gonna touch on that in just a moment. So as always, just make sure you are following us on Twitch if you're not already. If you're watching this live, definitely get in the chat. Let us know your thoughts, especially if you've got any questions about getting in the games industry. We do have a Discord that you can join if you have any questions and want to continue the discussion after you've watched the interview. And you can follow us online. We're on social media. We are at mayamada on Twitter, at mayamada TV on Instagram. And I think I've done all the self-promotion I need to at this point. So let's get into the interview. So Emily, you started your role as a game system engineer. I need to make sure I get those words in the
junior
right order.
game systems engineer. It's quite a mouthful. But yeah.
Okay, I knew it was some combination of that. But before doing that, you were a cartoonist, also worked in hospitality and a teacher, which I might have to come to, just working with kids. We might have to touch on that a little bit. But so one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you, and I thought it'd be an interesting conversation, as well as you just starting a journey in the video games industry, is that you are someone who has been a cartoonist, making some form of cartoons, comics, and is now in engineering. I'm someone who has been in engineering and is now making comics and cartoons. So at some point we must have like crossed paths. And
complete opposite.
on the way out. Yeah. So I thought that was quite interesting. So I mean, even before we get into the video games, like what kind of cartoons, comics were you making, and why?
Right. Yeah. I've always loved like reading comics and drawing and telling stories. So I did illustration at like university, probably about 9 years ago. And after that, I didn't really want to be an illustrator, but I enjoyed making my own like little comics and like self-published zines. And they were more kind of sort of stories from my own life or like observations of other people. It was all quite like real life kind of stuff.
Like slice of life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it actually didn't start off like that. I used to write like a lot of sort of absurd stories with made up characters and weird things happening.
That's what I do now.
Is it? Yeah.
yeah, absurd stuff with weird things happening. Yeah.
Yeah, which was a lot of fun. Yeah. But I don't think I was never very good at writing long stories like that. I would always kind of lose my momentum. But the kind of slice of life ones sort of started. I was like in Sicily when the pandemic struck, and I started making comics out of that, and they actually got I think people related a lot more to them than the like other stories I'd been writing, and I was also able to write a lot more. So I think I've accidentally found
material in the
yeah. And I still kind of do in my like free time. I've been like quite busy recently, so I haven't as much. But I still, I don't think I'll actually ever stop drawing cartoons, but maybe just slow down the pace. Yeah.
Fair enough. Do you have any favorite comics or illustrators or anything?
Ooh, I've got quite a lot of comic artists who I really like. That's actually I haven't I haven't really thought recently. Who do I like? I like Linda Barry. Really like her comics. Something I read recently that was really good was, I can't remember the author's name, but it's called Moms. And it was a comic about like this author had written about sort of his mum's life and her friends. And I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
There's one you should probably check out, which is Rachel Smith, because she did a comic called Quarantine Comics, and she did a similar thing. I don't know if you come across it. She basically documented her experience during the pandemic, and
cool.
with like a lot of slice of life comics. I'll send you a link.
Cool.
And also, I think at this point people are going, I thought we were here to speak video games. So we are gonna talk video games. But yeah, I will send you that that link to that. So, all right. So you're making comics. You have a sort of destination in mind for what you want to do. At what point did you think I want to work in video games? And so when did that come? And what were your first steps towards that?
So I think the first thing that I got interested in was like the programming side, and that was kind of through like a friend was learning how to program, and I just didn't really realize that was something that you could sort of do. I thought you had to go to like university to learn to program and do computer science. I didn't realize you could actually learn at home using the internet or whatever. So
you kind of thought you missed the boat in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was kind of interested, so I started looking into it, and I think I had lots of false starts because I didn't really know where to look. And then my partner he also sort of does a bit of programming, so he like helped me out. And eventually got like on that path, figured out that I like was really enjoying it. I did a course with a company called Code First Girls, and it was like a free course for women and non-binary people who want to like learn a bit of programming. So I did I think it was like a month of that, which was really good. And at the same time, the bits that I was kind of enjoying from programming were all the like kind of, it got my imagination fired up for like sort of figuring out how to make little games. Even they were very like simplistic, but like that's the bit that was really like motivating.
That creative
me.
process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get that.
And I think when I think about it now, I think it's kind of like quite similar to what I was doing in comics, because it is kind of like with games, it's a bit like there's often like this big, world that it seems like sort of a magic world that you can explore and loads of things can happen. And that's kind of what I liked doing through my comics too, is like making all these characters when they weren't the like real life comics, but making all these characters and building
more
up a world. Yeah.
That's interesting you say that, and I definitely agree. Like I said, as being a former software engineer, I definitely appreciate, because I always felt there's almost like a perception of creativity and who is creative, who can be creative, and part of that perception is if you're programming, it's not creative, but actually it's you're literally creating things from scratch. You have an idea, you're designing something, you're putting it together, you're putting it out in the world, and then getting that feedback, and that's creativity. So so it's kind of when people say like, oh, you used to do programming and now you're doing something completely different. In many ways, yes, I am doing something completely different, but still thinking up things, designing them, making them, putting them out. And so it's definitely creative.
There's more similarities and I think that's like, I think I definitely had that perception as well of like programming or things with computers. I just thought like that's completely like, not creative at all, really dry. I could never do that sort of thing. And when I got my first taste of it, I was like really, really surprised. yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good. And yeah, definitely it's good that, and I say this from first-hand experience, very few female software engineers. I saw like through the degree I did, through my work. So it's good that more people have that awareness like that you've had.
Yeah.
And let me get your title right. Junior Game System Engineer. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I understand junior. What is a game system engineer?
So it's I'm not, because this is the first like company that I've worked at, so I'm not sure if this is different in different places. But how it works at like Jagex, it's kind of they have a team that works on more like gameplay. It's called like content development at Jagex. I suppose in other companies it's more like gameplay. And they use like an in-house scripting language at Jagex. And then so like the engine team, which is what I'm part of, kind of maintains the like engine, which so say the content developers are writing like making a character do something or say something or walk somewhere, and I don't know, it's like, walk to here, and that's the command that they use to make the character walk to a place. Then in the engine team, we write like the code that makes that command work.
Okay.
So it's like underneath, there's this in-house scripting language, then the engine is like underneath that language. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so that you've got this, and I mean, people watching might be familiar with Unreal Engine or Unity. I think those are the main two kind of out there engines, and then companies will have their own engines. So, like for people who might not know, it's like basically to make the game, you need an engine to translate your inputs into the actions in the world and the world itself and everything that goes on in that. So that's what you're doing is quite low level. So you're saying if you've got a scripting language, so a gameplay programmer can say we want a character to go here, move in this direction, move in this way. That then has to get at some point translated into language that the machine, your PlayStation, your PC, your Xbox understands, and that's where you work, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So.
And I mean, I'm just like a few months in, so there's probably loads of other stuff that happens in the team as well that I'm not aware of yet. But that's so far, that's
cool. So you're on that learning process, that journey as well. So has it been kind of eye-opening for you, especially at where you're working in terms of the process and the engine? Has it been eye-opening for you in like looking at how games work?
Yeah, 100%. Probably for lots of different reasons. First of all, just in like the scale of things, like before I started, I had, done little projects myself or in like small groups with like friends, and the projects had always been quite, like relatively small. So like going into a job where like the game is like a big live game, the code base was like, incredibly different to what I'd seen before.
Because you're coming onto something that's been worked on for years and years, and has, and again, I'm thinking back to my days as a software engineer when you've got an existing code base that multiple people have worked on, and there's like thousands and hundreds of thousands of lines of code or whatever it might be, and you've got to kind of dig into that and figure out if something's not working. You have to figure out what's there already and then how do you make changes to that.
Yeah, I find that really interesting as well, because I'd heard, people talk about this but when I was getting into sort of doing training and stuff, like talking about legacy code, and always with this like, ooh, legacy code, like this old code. And I was like, ooh, it sounds awful. And in many ways, probably like it is, but I actually find that really like interesting to like go to see, I found it interesting at Jagex anyway to see code that's been like written like years and years ago, and then like stuff that's like more recent. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you were saying about the course you did with Cold First Girls. So we've talked about like you being in the internship and just starting. So do you want to fill in that gap, how you went from that course to even like finding the internship to where you are now?
Yeah. So yeah, I did that course, and I actually I got very kind of lucky in the like sort of in the situation I was in, because it was the pandemic, and I had a teaching job lined up, and I lost that because it was teaching international students in Edinburgh, and obviously no international students could come to Edinburgh.
Yeah.
So I lost my job, and then there was no like my I've always had like hospitality jobs in the past as well, and then that was like a no-go. So I went on universal credit then, and I was like searching for jobs and doing this like coding thing as well, just in my free time. And then there was I because of that, I managed to like get funding for a coding course in Edinburgh. So that was like sort of a bit of luck that came out of like bad luck, which was nice. So I did this coding course in Edinburgh, and it was more for like software development as opposed to like games development. So it was
so more general.
Yeah, exactly. And more like web dev. It was like, yeah, we made kind of websites and apps, things like that. And then when that was like 4 months, so when that finished, I then went on like the job hunt, and I was actually mainly applying to like software dev or web dev roles, because I just didn't think I would have a chance in games. But at the same time, like I was just doing like personal projects, and they were all like game stuff, and I started learning, because 2 of the languages that seem like most used in games are like C++ and C#. And we hadn't covered those on the course I did, so I started learning C++ and making projects with that were like all to do with games. Meanwhile, I was like applying for the software jobs, and then I felt like sort of, am I wasting my time doing these like games projects? But it was kind of like, yeah, it was like sort of like my passion. It's the thing that I was like enjoying the most. And I just didn't know, should I be actually focusing this time on making like software development projects for like making apps and things? But I continued doing it anyway. And then the internship at Jagex was actually the only games thing I applied for, because I thought I would have no chance at like a permanent like role at all. I didn't even think I had a chance at the Jagex role, to be honest. So my plan was kind of to get software development role, and then in my spare time work up like a portfolio for games. And then like after like a year start applying properly for like games jobs.
Right.
So it kind of, yeah. So I actually was pretty shocked when I got like the call from Jagex to say I'd got an interview. But yeah, that's kind of how that sort of happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. There you go. So that's really good to hear. And I mean, you had this plan and you basically just skipped. You just skipped ahead to the actual thing that you wanted to do. And yeah, it's funny because a lot of the time it's like internally you say like, oh, I'm not sure if I can do that, so I'm not gonna go for it.
Yeah.
But I guess you won't know until you actually go for it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's
got it.
Yeah. And I think that's the first time in my life that's like really been proven true, because like I almost wasn't going to apply. I literally thought I had no chance. So yeah.
It's mad how that works sometimes. So I mean, when I do these interviews, I often ask for advice from people in the industry for those who are just starting out. and obviously you're someone who is one of the people who are just starting out, but if you look back all of last year, to say that person who is in a similar position as you might not have studied computer science or video games at university or wherever, what advice would you give to them thinking about, can I work in the games industry, especially for young girls as well? Not to put that pressure on you, but you know.
I guess, yeah, so just from my
what would you say to the generation of all young girls everywhere? Go.
I think just the fact that like it is actually possible, because that is one thing that I thought it wasn't possible, and especially to get into like games programming, you would have had to do computer science at university, or like a games course at university, and it was kind of a shock to me that a good shock that's like not necessary, like even the fact that I did like a course, but I think that you can also do those kind of projects in your free time, using like resources on the internet. There is loads of resources on the internet for free that you can use. And I think with for like to girls and like women in particular, I guess it is a lot more intimidating when like everyone around you is a man and you're like the only woman. But hopefully this I think more and more women are starting to like get into these sort of roles, and kind of, it seems to me anyway, but maybe this is just from like being on Twitter and things like this. So I don't know. Hopefully that'll like trickle down, and in the future there'll be more women, and it will be less of an intimidating environment. Yeah, and
I think you said something at the beginning which is like really small but really impactful. It's possible because so I work with young people in school, so sometimes as young as like 7, 8, up into teens and things, and talking to them about creative industries, and kind of seeing firsthand when you don't think something is possible, just that can cut all the potential, all the future potential. So I think that's a good thing to say. Just, it's possible. Once it's possible, there's a chance like you as that young person can think, okay, how do I do it? But if it's not possible, then there's no effort put forward to it. I think that's where a lot of the problems kind of start.
I totally agree. And that, oh sorry, I lost you again for a second. And that, kind of on that point as well, like when there is something, because I think that can be one thing that can be intimidating about that, when you think something's not possible, is that it feels sort of like maybe it's embarrassing to try. I think that's what I kind of felt, slightly embarrassed to like put myself out there and try something in case like it was a total failure. But I just sort of got over that, and kind of put my heart into like this application for that internship, which I actually hadn't within the web dev roles that I'd been applying for. I put everything into this one, and it like paid off. But even when it doesn't pay off, like I think it's just worth putting your heart into something, and then like forgetting about it, move on to the next thing, and see see what happens.
That detachment is important.
Exactly.
Some measure of detachment. I totally get that. So you talked about your internship at Jagex and getting the full position, but for those that don't know who Jagex are and what they work on, can you tell us some of the games that have come out of Jagex?
So they're most well known for 2 games, which are RuneScape and Old School RuneScape, and they've got some other things in development at the minute that are unannounced. And RuneScape and Old School RuneScape are both MMOs. Big live games. I think it might be I think this year is like their 20th year in operation. So yeah, it's been going for a while. And yes, I should say old school is the one that I'm working on.
So yeah, some like storied names in video games, because like 20 years for
Yeah. There's a good documentary about like the games as well, the history, which is interesting. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Okay, cool. All right, add that to my watch list.
Yeah.
And you mentioned working at sort of your previous roles in hospitality as a teacher. I'm always curious to know, like, as people take their journey, and it's never a straight line. It's always like a wandering path. But is there anything that you've picked up from past roles, past industries, that you think has helped you in what you do now?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I think from both teaching and hospitality, a big thing was like communicating with people, which when I was like younger, say like 20 years old or whatever, I was pretty shy. So I think those kind of roles really helped me with like communicating and being like comfortable, sort of presenting and talking to people in general, which I think has helped in this role. I think in most jobs it's like good to be, it's usually like helps if you can like present and things like that. I
agree.
Yeah, so that has been useful, because that was something I was terrible at before. I think from teaching, I think because I was teaching like English as a foreign language in Italy, and I think from that experience, what I kind of learned was maybe some like empathy. I think maybe because I was also in a totally new cultural like situation, couldn't speak the language very well, and I maybe kind of, it slowed me down to like have a bit more like empathy of like what other people might be going through.
That's okay. That's interesting. Picked up, and it's also interesting you mentioned sort of two non-technical skills. Now, obviously, there's only I can't imagine there's much you'd learn about game engine in teaching or hospitality, but the two things you mentioned are about those, you know, non-technical sides of any role really that are really important, because I found that as well, like going from my degree into the job and then sort of out of the job into like entrepreneurship and self-employment, that it's how you communicate with people, whether it's like in a team or like you mentioned, sort of presenting, which is super important. I didn't realize how important until I left my my job, but yeah, it's interesting you picked up on those two things.
Yeah. And I think maybe one thing as well, which is slightly, I don't know, just kind of about not really getting, maybe this is just more with age and not with like jobs, but not getting as panicked about things. I think even though I was like, felt really nervous coming into this like internship, I also was kind of like, nothing terrible is going to happen. You know, it's going to be okay, which maybe in the past I've been a lot more, had a lot more worries. Yeah.
I get that. Yeah, you definitely get a bit more perspective as you get older. So. Yeah. All right. And then one of the last things I wanted to ask, as someone with an interest in games who now works in games, is you working in games, has that affected just your interest in games, like in your own time at all?
I think like in some, yes and no. I think in some ways, because this is the first time I've ever had a job where I'm like looking at a computer for most of the day. So, you know, so sometimes I'm like, oh, I really need a break from like looking at a screen.
Yeah, from screens, yeah.
Yeah. But also, like so for example, like I'm working on like old school RuneScape, and I had played that like years ago when I was younger, but not for ages. And I don't really know how far along with the game I got when I was younger either. Not very far, I don't think. But it's got me, because it's such a big like open world, it has got me really like into playing the game that I'm like working on. Outside, which is a bit sad maybe that
understandable.
Yeah. And
although I thought you might go the other way and say that now you play shorter and less involved games, but
it's quite. I don't think it has really affected it very much because I'm quite like I'm quite a casual gamer anyway. I wouldn't spend like hours like a day playing games. My partner does, but I'm like more like casual. So I think probably it's been all right. Yeah.
Okay.
At the same level.
Yeah, cool. No, it's always interesting to know how working in the industry kind of impacts like games as a hobby. I know for me, and it's probably an age thing as well, but working in and around the games industry, I don't make games, but we work in the industry. And it's the same with comics, actually. The more I work in it, the less time, or at least perceived time, I think I have. So particularly with games, like give me something short. Like I would love to get into like the big open world, but I know I'm not gonna get to the end of that. Give me something short. I recently played Ratchet and Clank, and I started the latest one, and I like that because I know I'll finish it. Like I know it might take me a while, it might take me longer than most people, but I know I'll finish it. So I'm like, give me something short that I can get to the end of, and I'm happy.
That actually makes sense. I think I'm quite similar in a way, to be honest, because even when I'm playing like old school RuneScape and it's like it's massive, I'm just doing it in tiny little chunks. I'll do one quest tonight, and then it's like I feel like I've completed that quest, and it's a bit
totally.
So it is
No, I do that as well. I'm very like, it doesn't take a lot to, I'm satisfied. A little chunk here, a little chunk there. And I'm good. I don't need to spend hours on something. But like everyone's different in the way they consume games. So that's cool to hear.
I think, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think maybe one thing that has contributed to it, and maybe this will wear off, is just probably because I'm new to like the industry, and here being in a company where everyone like loves games and everyone is like talking about different games has probably like rubbed off on me a bit, where I've been like, this is amazing. Okay.
So what you're saying is that we need to come back later on when you're more jaded and you've given up on games, and then have that interview, and then we'll see what your answer is.
Like 3 years time. Right now I'm like, everything's so cool. Like,
I don't want to see another video game. Not talking about video games. I'm just going to read this book. Oh, cool. All right. Well, it'll be interesting to see how you do get on. Like we mentioned, you're very much at the start of your journey, but thanks for joining us and letting us know how that journey has been so far. And hopefully people watching know, if you take anything away from this conversation, is that it's possible. So thanks for bringing us your perspective, Emily.
Thank you.
Cool. And just so people know, we do interviews like this with people in the games industry, whatever their position may be. So people in different positions, different levels of experience, all to bring awareness of different career paths in the games industry and let people know, like we've hopefully done here, that it is possible to work. So you can give us your thoughts on this interview. Check out our other interviews on YouTube. We also have our Discord, where you can continue the conversation, particularly if you're someone who is interested in being in the games industry and wants to know more. We have our Twitch, so our live GamePad online events stream across Twitch, so you can follow us there as well. And if you have not gotten tired of hearing my voice yet, you might be interested in our podcast, Story X Story, where my co-host Tazzy and I talk about stories across pop culture and have more creator interviews with people across industries, including video games. So you can check all that out. I'll put the links in the description. But until the next interview, until the next time, stay safe, and we will see you all again soon. Hey there, I'm Nigel from mayamada. Thanks for watching our video. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other great videos we have on the channel. You can also join the GamePad Discord and check out the next event at gamepad.events. We'll see you soon.